This is a video I've been thinking about for a while. I keep trying to find easier ways for my beginners, and I think I'm doing about the easiest thing I know of today, so I hope you enjoy it. The pattern bundle is in my Etsy store, and I'm going to make several of these outfits out of Dollar Tree items. The first thing you do is print out the pattern from the Etsy shop, and then I traced around it onto the freezer paper. You can find this freezer paper at grocery stores, and then I ironed it to the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to make the little high waist dress out of the fat quarter. I'm going to make this sleeveless dress with the other fat quarter. The pants is the beautiful green placemat. The shorts is the lining of the green placemat. The jacket is going to be this beautiful sunflower fabric, and I extended the sleeves, so you have to cut two of these freezer papers. And notice you can label it, but I can just look at it and know what pattern it is, but you might want to label it, and especially where you're going to put the fold. Okay, the top is the lining from the sunflower placemat, and of course I'm going to make some Hotshotpolkadot shoes. I'm going to start with all the pieces that have a curve. You notice that I pinned it just on the fabric, not on the freezer paper, and that's just to keep the fabric and the lining together. And I'm going to sew one end. I know I said curved pieces, but I'm going to sew one end of the shoe. Just one. Before you take the freezer paper off, cut less than 1/4 of an inch where you sewed, and cut exactly where the pencil lines are on the pattern. There are no seam allowances drawn on the pattern. It fits if you sew it like this. Next, I'm going to sew the curve of the shorts, and again I pinned off of the freezer paper. I'm sewing with white thread on doll clothes. I I'm not that particular, but if you would like to match your thread, then that is certainly your prerogative. I can already tell that this fabric is going to fray like crazy. Dollar Tree fabric has that tendency. You could zigzag, and you may still have to zigzag after all's said and done, but I just bought a pair of pinking shears, and they look like this. And Fiskars, I've got several pair of different brand names, but Fiskars seems to be the best, and I'm not sponsored. And again, leave a little space where you sewed and cut as close to the line as you can. I sewed the curves on the pants, and I'm gonna, I think I'll use my pinking shears on the pants also. And remember, you don't have to add a seam allowance to your pattern. I've already drawn it in for you. Just remember to, after you sew, then cut you a little, probably a little over 1/8 of an inch. This one I got really close, and it could come apart. So I've sewn the 3 curves, and I'm ready to move on to the next step. But go ahead and leave the freezer paper on it until we come back to these 3 items. I'm ready to sew the shoulder seams of the A-line dress and the jacket. When I sew this A-line dress, I like to put a slope in it, and that means you just sketch you a little triangle right there, or an angle. But this time I'm going to sew it exactly like the pattern shows. So we're going to do the shoulder seams only. I could not fold this fabric because the flowers would have looked like they were growing sideways, so I had to sew the shoulder seams. This will make more sense after you've watched me put the extended sleeves onto the jacket. But after you've sewn the shoulders, only cut the shoulders, the neckline, the sleeve opening, and the bottom of the jacket. Do not cut under the arms yet. You're going to place a pin right under the sleeves, flip it over, and I'm not sure you can see it, but I drew a little blue mark where that pin is. Alright, so I opened it up, and I did put a pin where my blue marks are. I have my sleeve attachments ready. The large part of the pattern sleeve goes at the shoulder seam, and the smaller size goes down at the wrist. Yeah, open it up, and make sure the fold goes right at the shoulder seam, and it should meet right where that pin is. Sometimes if I don't cut it out carefully, it doesn't. Okay. So right side to right side. And for the sleeves, you can go ahead and pull the freezer paper off. And you can reuse this. I've got one that I've made probably at least 10 pair of shorts with one. You don't have to recut every time. So this is a pattern you can reuse. And you'll want to fold back the freezer paper on just the sleeve, but don't take it off yet. You'll see why in a few minutes. And I'm just going to sew my sleeve extensions. I tried it on my doll just to see how long I wanted the sleeves, and it's a lot of extra room in case you want to make a little cuff on it, but that's a video for another day. I'll just make it just like the pattern shows. And I will trim that excess fabric off on the sleeve. And I've left the freezer paper on so that I'll know where to sew. So I'm going to sew up the side, under the sleeve, and just extend that seam down the extended sleeve. I want to show you something about the pattern. As you're happily sewing up this extended sleeve, you get to this part and you need to just fold it back and keep angling it. You see that it's still angling until you get to that point. Then you go straight down. This is the side that I cut the corner to the seam. Don't clip the seam threads. Look how sharp that angle is. And then this is the side that I did not cut. And that's a mess. So you got to cut this corner. Usually I don't like some of the unconventional fabric that I use, but I kind of like this one. It's real crisp. Okay, well, I got my fan on. Let's see. You could take the lining from the placemat as your binding for the jacket. Just put it on the right side, sew it, and then turn it under. But I'm going to do this because, well, it's just more me. I'm going to use that as my binding, and I'll show you how to do that. And in one of my other videos, I said I would come up with a better facing for the neckline, and I don't know why I didn't think of this, but here it is. I took the jacket and gave myself a little rectangle and drew it. I'm going to cut it, and then I rounded it off evenly. I put right sides together, and I'm just going to sew around the neckline. And don't forget to clip it, or you're going to have the same problem that you had under the arm. It will pucker. So I'm turning this to the inside, and then for the binding, I'm going to pin a strip of fabric all the way down the front, including this little facing. And I can just hear some of my more advanced sewists saying, well, that's just not how you do it. Well, sometimes I think the conventional pattern makers just make instructions way too hard. So this is easy. When you get to this corner, you can just turn it down like that. Or if you want to get fancy, you can make that little like a pivot there, like quilters do when they're binding the corners of their quilt. And I have finished this jacket. It's done. That's my little basting threads. Alright, so I'm gonna finish the other two tops the same way. I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but my pattern bundle has 3 different necklines. The jacket pattern is cut bigger, and it has kind of a rounded neckline. The short top has kind of a boat neck, and then the plain top has a V-neck, and you can interchange any of these necklines. One time I even took my shoe pattern and made a low scoop neckline. Now, because I was able to fold, I had enough fabric to fold the shoulder seam, I'm not going to have to sew a shoulder seam on the high waist top and the blousey type top. So I'm ready to sew under the arms and down the side seam. And remember, I said I was going to leave a little bit of extra to lengthen my high-waisted top. Now I'm ready to finish my shorts and my pants. So I can take the freezer paper off and pull the inseams together. I'll sew the inseams. The pants, you do the very same thing. Pull it apart and sew the inseams on the pants. So I'm going to do that in a jiff. Before I sew the inseams, and while the pants are flat, the legs are flat, I will go ahead and make my hem on both the shorts and the pants. Here's a pinning tip. You want them to be the same at the hem. And once you pin the hems, if it's not quite the same at the crotch, that's okay. I'm going to cut that excess fabric off. So here we go. Same with the pants, and if that bothers you a whole lot, then adjust the pattern, but I find it easier just to adjust it when I'm sewing. A lot of times it's how you fold at your hem and or how you've cut the pattern out. Sometimes mine's just perfect and sometimes it looks like that. And again, you're going to clip your corners and your curves. You're going to have a little bit of a gap in the back, but you don't want it too tight or it won't go over the doll's body. And you can put elastic there if you want to, but the pants stay on. I don't find it necessary. And after I top stitch that, I'm done with the pants. Ta-da! Not sure how I feel about this fabric, but it was the lining of this placemat, so it was only 50 cents. Okay, we're going to finish up the A-line and the shoes. And as many times as I've sewn this pattern, I made a goof. I cut, can you see where I cut on the pattern? Well, I've got to have a seam here. I need to sew along this line. So leave yourself some room on both sides. And I did sew the shoulder seam. Now I'm going to cut the sleeve opening, or the armhole opening, and right on the line, and then the neckline. I've placed a rectangle of, well, I put white, you could use anything under it, because I want to line this part, and down just a little, maybe, I don't know, it's probably 1, 2, maybe 3 inches. I'm folding down where I'm going to sew, but I'm leave this freezer paper on. You still need it. And now I'm going to pull it through. When I turned it, the pattern came off, so I'm going to iron it back on. And then you sew the fabric part together and the lining together. Turn it down. It makes a nice little armhole opening. And I hope you didn't forget to clip your curves and your corners. That's very important, makes it lie nice. And actually, this is my favorite pattern on my pattern bundle. I'm going to go press it with my iron. And by the way, I've got my iron easily accessible, and I iron every time I sew. I sewed the back up to the lining. I pinked everything. I just made that word a verb. Yes, I did. Got the hem, the bottom ready to hem. I saved the best for last. I took my freezer paper off. I clipped the curves and the corner. I'm turning it to the right side. And of course it's going to need pressing with the iron. I've perfected my instructions since I made that first blurry shoe video. Glued at the top first, and then glued this side that's going to go on the inside of the shoe. And then glue the one where you have finished off the outside of the shoe. And something else I've been doing, it works just fine, is I just put, I don't sew, get it focused, I don't sew a straight stitch there. I just sew it a little, I'll show you after I do it. Okay, I left this part undone, and I went ahead and glued this part. I'm going to try it on my doll, and then I'll pin it. That way you know it's going to fit. Then I'm just going to tack the very top of the shoe with several hand sewn stitches. Probably maybe 4 or 5. And you don't really even have to sew this part. It stays on the doll just fine. Okay, it's finished. And I've got some suggestions in the digital pattern as what to use for the sole, and several suggestions on what to use for the trim. And there you go. I attached just a rectangle piece of fabric onto the short waist top, and you see where I'm making it longer. I just like that better, I think. And I also made the hem longer. I'll probably hem it. I usually like real short little outfits, but I'll probably hem it about there.